Frank Ackerman is an economist. We just reapproved Atrazine, even though it has polluted every waterway in our country and is feminizing our men by creating more estrogen even in the womb. It is also affecting reproduction and our ability to reproduce even 3 generations forward. Frank Ackerman is an economist who looks at atrazine and the cost benefit we get from it. In other words, looking at how much money our farmers are making versus how much it's costing us in pollution and our health.
There, but it's with the atrazine story. So we put this possibly quite hazardous pesticide on most of the corn in the country. We get 4.4% more corn. The thing is that brings down the price. If you're in farming, if everybody has a bumper crop, the price goes down and you can be worse off. So if everyone gave up atrazine and yields dropped by 4.4%, the price of corn, according to these same industry studies, would go up by 8%. The price per bushel would go up 8%. So the farmers would be better off, actually. They'd lose 4.4% of their crop, but they get paid 8% more per bushel. So the only people who win from this, from using atrazine, they're not on the farms. The people who win from it are the people who are enjoying cheaper corn because we grew more and it was cheaper. And corn, there's a little bit of corn that people eat as corn on the cob or popcorn, but corn is mostly used to produce beef, ethanol, and corn syrup. So I try to imagine, picture you have to go tell your doctor, the bad news is corn's so expensive now that I have to eat 4.4% less beef and corn syrup next year. My guess is your doctor's going to applaud that's obviously better for you. So, what are we doing? Trying to spray these chemicals on to save these tiny amounts of money to make food that we probably eat too much of a little bit cheaper. It makes no sense at all.
It doesn't, and that if we stop doing that, then we would have enough offset costs that we could retrain these farmers. GMO crops, that's over half of how we're spending billions of dollars, and the GMO corn for the biofuels where we're creating and actually, Frank, what do you think about that? Like the economics of biofuels and offsetting the use of GMOs and glyphosate to grow or atrazine to grow this corn for biofuel.
I don't think corn makes any sense as a fuel. There's some arguments for particular biofuels that might make sense, but the corn is not efficient enough as a way to grow energy for it to make any sense. You use so much energy growing and processing the corn into ethanol. You hardly come out ahead in terms of saving other energy. It's a way to keep corn farmers fully employed, but I'm not sure that it's really doing that much good for the rest of us.
And they act like we don't want anything else to eat but corn. We want other things to eat besides corn. I had mentioned on my show saying we're going to charge you. We're going to charge you some extra money there. So I guess
the economics of renewable energy. One of the stories that I find most interesting is the story of wind power in the middle of the country. Because we have places basically between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains, the Plain States, are some of the windiest onshore parts of the world. And it is incredibly cheap to set up wind turbines there. And these are almost all red states. Some of them are deeply into climate denial, and they're just building wind turbines because it's so incredibly cheap, because it's so windy. And it costs the same amount to put up a turbine whether you're in a very windy or a slightly windy place. And so you have states that deny that they want to do anything about climate change that are taking some of the leading roles in installing renewable energy.
Ah.
The Kansas, a lot of states have these renewable portfolio standards. They say you have to get a certain amount of electricity from renewables by some date in the future. Kansas had a standard that said they had a goal of 20% renewable energy by, I don't know, some year in the future, and the Republicans repealed it. But by the time they repealed it, Kansas was already getting 29% of its electricity from wind. So what was the point of repealing it? Onshore wind in windy places is the absolutely cheapest form of renewable energy around. Big dams are cheap, but all the sites for big dams are used up. That whole section in the middle of the country, Iowa, the Dakotas, all through there down to West Texas, is all such wind country that we have an enormous renewable energy economy springing up, often in states that are committed to denying its existence.
That's so ironic. Why don't you go ahead and give us just a quick lesson on the economics of climate change, because we have things that are going to happen as a result of climate change. And I like what you said in your paper, that we could have a loss of 5%, but if we spent 1% of that 5%, we could save 4.
Well, that's true. If you knew that those were the right numbers, that would be a no-brainer. You'd absolutely say spend 1 to save 5. We're reasonably sure about the costs of reducing emissions. It's not free, but it's in the low percents of the economy, 1, 2, 3%, some people's estimates. What we don't know is how bad the damages will be. And this year's hurricanes showed that. I hear you've enjoyed a few years of drought out there, which may be a little worse than it has been sometimes. How much of that, how much sea level rise, how much some of these hidden problems like the acidification of the oceans, which is going to undermine coral reefs and the entire shellfish industry, and all kinds of problems that are looming, and we're moving into climate territory that we've never been in. We're moving into temperatures that there's no human experience with. We don't know how fast things will get bad, but we know they are getting bad. How fast will the Greenland ice sheet melt? Well, no one's exactly sure, but it's pretty obvious that ice melts faster when the air is warmer. So the more we warm things up, the more these big ice sheets are going to melt, which is going to contribute to sea level rise. So this is like an insurance policy against, a potentially cataclysmic loss. It's like, you buy fire insurance even though you don't think your house is going to burn down, because it would be too big a loss if your house did burn down. Most people never use their fire insurance, but they still think it's a good deal. And we have to think about climate policy that way. If we know that we could spend 1, 2, 3% of our incomes creating a new renewable energy industry, which would create jobs itself. Wind power technicians, one of the fastest growing jobs in the country right now. It would definitely create new categories of jobs. It would create new industries. It would cost a little more than the old kind of energy did, but if it helped to catalyze a worldwide movement toward controlling climate change, then the droughts and the hurricanes and the sea level rise and all of that would be less of a problem in the future. And what we might save, preventing our entire social house, as it were, from burning down, is just incalculably greater. So I think
is that the kind of thing that you
argument.
Cover in your climate change and global equity book? Because we only have a couple minutes left, and I want to, sorry to cut in there. I just wanted to make sure I got the names of your books in before we finish the show, because we only have 2 minutes left.
The latest one that I've done is called Worst Case Economics. Extreme events in climate and finance, and it's talking about that kind of argument. What makes it so likely that we have financial crashes and we have extreme climate risks, and both of them are dangerously more common than we ever would have hoped or expected. So how should we be protecting ourselves against them? That's the problem I've been thinking about in my latest writing. Again, if you go to frankackerman.com on the web, it's my website of my publications. You can find all of these.
Well, I'm cost adding up, adding up, adding up.
That's right. I think what you're quoting there is from the study I did of European regulations, looking at, it was a lot like the TPP with the Asian countries, but this TTIP, they called it Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership with the US and the EU. We're going to both somehow promote trade by reducing regulations on both sides of the ocean. And what I concluded looking at that was that the value of the health protections and the jobs that are created by environmental protection in Europe was greater than the benefits that they claimed that people would get from a little more trade. So that you have to watch out that you're not shooting yourself in the foot, to get some small economic benefit when the costs that it brings are even worse.
And the one that you had for the chemical industry model,
Yeah.
that one, I actually sat down and did the math because I was trying to figure out what the total revenue was for the chemical industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had in there that if the chemical industry, because it's hard from what I got from the paper, that the regulations that we have in the United States are not the same as the EU. They're actually, they tend to be tighter and have more rules than the United States.
That's right. Absolutely.
And when you looked at trying to get, if companies from the United States wanted to meet their rules, and just even the companies there, they have to submit what is required. We just take it, we just say, oh, the company that's submitting this pesticide, here's the research that they did. Oh, that looks good. And we just trust the company did a really good job. They do review it and make sure it's a well-designed study or whatever. But there is a lot of trust involved with the wolf watching the hen house there. But they don't do that so much in the EU, do they, Frank? They ask for a little bit more.
That's right. Their chemicals policy, which they adopted, 10, 11 years ago, requires that anybody who sells or imports chemicals in Europe has to do a certain amount of testing to demonstrate that they're safe. And the bigger the volume you're selling, the more testing you have to do. The tests get more and more complicated. We tend to have a idea that chemicals are innocent until proven guilty. People can bring things onto the market, and it's up to EPA or whoever to try to figure out if there's anything wrong and then try to stop them.
Oh, when people start dropping dead from it, then we know, hey, we got to do something about that. People are dropping dead. I think we should take a closer look at it.
So I did this study of what it was going to cost Europe to do that. And they have price lists and estimates of what it costs to have labs run that number of tests. And it was, several billion euros a year. But, nobody knows what a billion is. So I said, what does that look like in comparison to the industry's revenue? And what it looked like was the increased cost of chemical testing would raise the cost of chemicals sold in Europe by 1/16 of 1%.
Wow.
And
that's nothing. That's nothing.
That's exactly the right
Compared
answer.
to-
That's
okay.
the only possible answer.
Well, let's
So a
put
lot
it
of
in
these
perspective,
protections-
Frank. Well, let's put it in perspective, because you just said that these rules and that we're going to only cost 1/16 of 1% compared to their total revenue. But what are we getting in return for that 1/16 of a percent that makes it so worth it and makes it pay for itself many, many times over?
So what Europeans get for that chemical regulation is the confidence that things that are on the market have been tested for a number of common health problems that chemicals could cause. They know that the manufacturer or the importer has tested them and has demonstrated that they don't cause this problem, that problem, the next problem. There's a list of things that they're known to be safe relative to. That's what you get for it. If you avoid, the next big chemical hazard, if you avoid the next PCB problem or, the DDT problems that we've had, if you avoid one of these big chemical hazards, which we've later had to clean up, it'll pay for itself many times over.
Okay, well, that is a perfect segue because I have, and the perfect example is atrazine, because atrazine is not allowed over there, right? But we allow it in the
That's
United
right.
States.
That's right. I think it's the second biggest pesticide here after Roundup, glyphosate.
It's number two. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
number two most used pesticide.
It's used on almost all the corn grown in the country and a number of smaller crops. It's most heavily used in corn.
But I thought we grow GMO corn. That's what I was confused about. Is there a GMO corn for atrazine, or is that we grow GMO corn but we just spray it with atrazine?
Well, there's all different
Types of corn, like the kind they feed farm
pesticides.
animals.
The GMO corn, I mean, one form of it is Roundup ready crops. The things that can survive if you drench the fields with Roundup, which kills all kinds of things and gets rid of a lot of weeds. Atrazine gets rid of a certain number of weeds. I mean, it's definitely a powerful weed killer that is spread on, most of the cornfields in the country just before or just after the corn sprouts. And
Well, yeah, let's put some math on to atrazine, because that's something that you've done the math on. And so we're spraying, it's the second most used pesticide. I mean, that means we're spraying millions of gallons per year. I mean, it could even be a billion.
Amounts of it that are getting sprayed. And to hear the industry talk about it, you'd think that this was what's standing between us and starvation. Like maybe we're going to lose 50% or 80% of the crop if we don't have these latest pesticides. So what I did, I'm not a biologist. I can't track down the exact health effects of something like this, but I am an economist, and I went looking for what were the economic benefits that the industry claimed it got from using atrazine. What do the defenders of atrazine say its economic benefits are? And the latest studies that they've done, which were trying to answer some of their earlier critics, where they do very careful quantitative work, they say that it increases corn yields by 4.4%. So we get, for all the corn we have in America, we get 4.4% more because we use atrazine.
Well, and when you compare that against all the other things we get from atrazine that we don't want, which is polluted water. Atrazine has been found in virtually every stream, waterway in our entire country. It's causing all kinds of birth defects. And we've mentioned these on the show, Dr. Tyrone Hayes. You can find our video on YouTube. And please subscribe, everyone, to Smart Health Talk. We need subscribers. We need you to go and hit that button to subscribe. And we've been really busy posting videos. We just posted one with our interview with Dr. Michael Hansen, Consumers Report. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Frank. For 35 years, he's been like our top pesticide scientist in the country, educating legislators. And Kate Webb, Rep. Kate Webb, who's my hero, along with our scientists like Frank over here that are, help setting us straight on where our focus should be and how we should be spending our money. But Kate Webb, she was not afraid to stand up to the evil Monsanto and introduced GMO legislation in Vermont, not once, but twice. And even though Monsanto was breathing...
Find podcasts for Smart Health Talk on iHeartRadio or YouTube.